Okay, we are continuing on. In the textbook, they cover a lot of information that you should be familiar with for your own learning in terms of Unity and in terms of designing your game for class later on in the semester. But in this video, I'm going to skip a lot of the middle section of the chapter and stick just to building the platform game, which is the goal of assignment 4. So up to this point, we have created our first platform moving system. So let's continue on now and develop the game itself. So the requirement for assignment number 4 is that you will have 3 sets of moving platforms, and you'll arrange them so that the player needs to move between those sets of platforms. And we're going to make in my example, we're going to make the platforms go up. So basically, it'll look sort of like a series of escalators. So this is an image of an example from our PowerPoint from the class. After the player makes it across the 3 different sets of moving platforms, as they reach the final location on the final platform, they should enter into a trigger zone. And when they enter into that trigger zone, it should turn on a final giant platform that they can then jump onto to end the game. So let's go ahead and make that happen now. So here I am back in my game that we've developed so far. And I'm going to set up the positioning for this first platform group. I want to make it act a bit more like an escalator. So I'm going to select my target B, Prefab here, and I'm going to raise it up. Doesn't matter exactly how much you raise it up, just whatever you like. Okay. And you'll see what happens when I click play. Now my platform nicely rises up, reaches the target B, and then comes back down again. So that's all working just fine. Now there are a few ways that you can make more platform sets. Remember, you need to have 3 of them for the assignment. One is to simply duplicate this whole thing that you've just created. Another way is to make a prefab out of this first set of things that you've done and then have new instances of that prefab. Either way will work exactly the same way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to group all of these items for this first set of moving platforms together. Then I'm going to make a prefab, and then I will add instances of that prefab and position them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new empty game object, and I'll call this platform set. And I'm going to grab our platform group, pull it in there, and I'm going to grab target A and target B, pull it right underneath that platform set. So all I've done is I've just simply grouped all these things together. I haven't actually changed anything else. And you should see that it will function just the same way as we're here in the game. It's still moving back and forth between the 2 of them. So now I can close down this new grouped collection of items. And I want to create a prefab out of that, so I'm going to drag the whole thing down into my Adventure Prefab folder in the project view, and that turns this into a prefab. Then I can either drag an instance of that prefab out into my hierarchy, or I can right-click on the existing instance in my hierarchy and choose Duplicate, and that will create a copy of it. Then I want to move that up. So I'll move it up like this. Now what I'm thinking ahead is I'm going to have sort of 3 copies of this. And so what I'd like to have right now is that this one I just made a duplicate. I'm going to make it be the topmost level. So I'm just going to raise it up, and then for now I'll just move it over a bit, not worrying too much about its exact location, going left or right. But in terms of going up, it's going to be just right above the bottom set. Then I'll go back to the first set again. I'm going to again choose Duplicate. And now I'm going to rotate around the y-axis 180 degrees. And when I do that, you'll see now that I've got basically the second floor version. I can raise that up so that it's even with the top location on my first set, and then just moving around inside my scene view, I can position it over a little bit. I'm going to make my set of platforms. There's a hard version of the game and an easier version. The hard version would be just to have the existing sets going so that we're going to have a platform that moves up to here and then moves back down, and then the player would then have to time things just right, or the game would have to be just timed right so they could quickly jump onto the next moving one, but that's awfully hard. So I'm going to simplify it a little bit by providing the player with a landing platform so they can ride a platform up and then just step off onto the landing platform. Then they can wait for the next moving platform to come down to where they're at, step onto the next moving one, right up to there, step off onto the next moving platform, and so on. All right, so I'm just eyeballing positions now, and I can do this by changing my view inside the scene. Again, not worrying a ton about it yet because I'm going to position everything really carefully once I have everything set up. But you can see what I'm doing here. I'm just getting different views and just checking to make sure that everything is pretty closely lined up. Doesn't have to be exact. Okay. So let me move my third set. So I'm selecting it. And I'll zoom out a little bit so I can see where that one needs to go. So let's see, my top of my second set is down right here. I want to give a place for my player to stand. Maybe I'll pull this one back over here so it acts sort of like an escalator at a department store or something. Okay, just taking a look at the positioning, lining things up as best I can without worrying too much about it at the moment. Okay, it looks pretty good, looks good, looks good. Top also looks pretty good. Now you can see I'm using this gizmo to change my view. I can click on each of these. I can also click down underneath the gizmo to switch back and forth from an isomorphic view to a perspective view. Isomorphic means it just takes away the third dimension, so everything is sort of flat, and then perspective makes it look more like the real world. So I've got my three sets here. Before I continue on to the next step, we'll take a look, and you'll see that yes, indeed, there's going up, and then that one's coming down. But I need a place for the poor player to stand on the second and third level so that they can wait for the platform to show up. So I need to have another platform on which they can stand. So to get that other platform, we made one originally when we were creating this project. If you remember, way back when we were making these target A and target B. So what I can do is I can grab that original prefab we created, the target object, and I can either drag it up in the hierarchy or I can drag it straight out into the scene. I'll drag mine straight out into the scene and position it pretty close to the landing on the second floor. I guess that's my first floor. So landing on the second floor is up over here. So I'll raise it up a little bit. Come over here. Change my view. Position it roughly where it needs to be. Want to get it pretty close to that upper platform so that they can just step off. So it's easy to do that. Okay, that looks pretty close. I want to check for this landing. First I'm going to change the name to make it clear to me what this is. So I'll call it landing. And I want to make sure in this case that it has a box collider on it. It does. And it's not a trigger. It's not. So that's good because we actually want to be able to step on that platform. Now that I've got the second floor one in place, I can create one for the third floor as well. Now I might be positioning this wrong. I'll have to play around a little bit to see. In fact, let me click play and we'll take a look, see what we've got. So here's our first one. You can see it going up, but I've got the place to stand actually positioned on the wrong side. I need it to be over here, right? So let me come back into my game, and I can see it needs to go between those two, so I'll position it over there like that. All right, I'm looking back, and that looks fine. Now that I've got that in place, I'm just going to grab that landing, and I'm going to duplicate it, and I'm going to pull it over close to where the next landing is going to be, which is right about there, and I'll position it roughly between those. Okay, that's pretty close. Check my side view. It's a little bit high. All right. I'll click play. And now I can give this a quick try. So I'll come over here. There's my guy there. I'm going to have to magically jump on him. There we go. Right up to the second level. And then I'm going to have to move quick. That's a little far away. So it'd be nice if I could just step on it without having to make the jump, so I might move that a little bit. But now I can stand here and wait for the next platform to come along. So here it is. Step over onto that one. It takes me up here. Step over onto this next waiting platform. Wait for the third level one. Step on it, and then I can ride all the way up to the top. Okay. So I now have my 3 sets of platforms. The next requirement for the assignment, if you remember, is to have a final big towering platform that is going to appear as if by magic when my player approaches that location. So what I'm going to do is I'll select I'm going to select this top platform set and come in and grab its platform B, which is right here, just to sort of make sure I've got the position right. Then I'm going to create a cube. And it'll stick it out there in the scene. And again, I'll use my positioning system here. I'm going to turn this onto isomorphic view, and I can see my scale for my cube is really small. So let's say I make it 4, and I'll make this 6. Here, the Z will make 6. So it's pretty big. Position it over by here, and I'll move it close to where my platforms are going to be. Then I need to make sure that its height is good. It's pretty dang short right now, so I'm just expanding out the height. I'll raise it out a little bit. This doesn't have to be perfect in terms of where the bottom is, but you want that top to line right up with the top of your top platform. Okay, so there it is. Not much to look at. Maybe I'll give it a texture as well, so I'll drag my bark onto that one. I need to make sure that it has a box collider. It does, because I need to be able to step on it, and I'll give it a name. I'll call it goal. Alright, that's my goal. Now I've got all the game platform set up. I've got the goal set up. The next thing I need to do is to create a trigger area near this top platform, this top target B, where the player will hit the target and then will cause this goal platform to be visible. So let's do this. I'm again going to zoom into this area so that I'm looking roughly in the right location. And now I'm going to create an empty game object. All right? And with an empty game object, no surprise, it is empty, so it doesn't have any appearance to it. So I'm going to give this empty game object a name. I'm going to call it the trigger. And I'm going to scale it to be 2 by 2 by 2. Right? Still looks like nothing, right? I'm going to add a component to it, which is going to be a box collider. And when I do that, you'll now see I've got the box collider, and actually, I scaled the transform on this, but of course there was no object, so that itself doesn't really look like much. But when I add the box collider, I can scale that, and that will increase the size of the collision area where our player can then run into the collider. So I'm going to position it out here. It just needs to be in a spot so that as the player gets close to this top platform, they'll run through that. And so right where they're at, it will definitely run through it. Now by default, your collider is going to be a real collider, meaning that if the first-person controller hits it, they'll be stopped. And in fact, they'll be pushed off of the moving platform, which we definitely don't want. So I'm going to choose isTrigger, which will convert that collider into a trigger. It means the player will still be detected when they move into this location, but they won't be stopped anymore. It won't have any physics associated with it. Now, in order for the game to do something when the player hits that trigger area, we're going to need another script. So I'm going to go and select my adventure script folder in the project view, choose Create, choose JavaScript, and let's create a very special kind of script. I'm going to call this script send message on trigger, and I'm going to open it up. Now I mentioned at the beginning of the first one of these videos that I wanted you to really pay careful attention when we got to the section of the lesson where you were creating a script that let one game object send a message to another game object. That's where we're at right now, so I want you to really pay careful attention to what I'm going to do next. Okay, here we are inside MonoDevelop, and I've got my send a message on trigger script open, and I've already put in the code. If you want to get this code, you can find it in the PowerPoint. You can also just pause the video here and type it in. So I've got three public variables here. First is one called correct object of game object type, and the next is send2object, which is also a game object type, and then finally a string called target function. Then I've got the function itself, and this is a built-in Unity function called onTriggerEnter, and it will get triggered any time that an object with a collider intersects with the bounds of a trigger. Okay? And remember, a trigger is just a special kind of collider itself, just one that won't stop the player. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to check if the game object that is intersecting with the trigger area is this correct object. So in our case, we only want to trigger the goal platform to become visible when the first-person controller intersects with the trigger object. If something else accidentally were to intersect with that trigger object, we don't want to set to turn the goal visibility on. So we're checking to make sure it's actually the first-person controller that's the thing that collided with the trigger zone. If it is, then we're going to communicate with that goal platform. That's what this is going to be. The send2 object we're going to associate with that goal platform object. That's what's happening right here. And then there's another built-in function inside Unity called sendMessage, where we can identify a specific game object, and then using using this function sendMessage, we can send a message to the specified game object. And then what we pass to the sendMessage function is a string, which is going to be the name of a function that is on a script that is attached to the game object that we're talking to. So one more time, that's a little confusing. Basically, we're going to identify a game object that's going to be the recipient of a message. We're going to send it a function called sendMessage, and then we're going to tell this game object we want you to run whatever function is identified right here. Okay? So we'll save all of that. We'll come back into Unity. Now here's my trigger box that I created before. So I'm going to attach this send message on trigger script to the trigger box. And then here I've got it over here. You can see here's the send message on trigger script. Now it's looking here to know which is the correct object we want to check What is it that we're looking for to hit this? Well, what we're looking for is the first person controller. So I'll drag that and drop it over there. And then where are we going to send a message? We're going to send a message to this goal platform. So I'll select it and drop it right there. And then we need to tell the script what function do we want this goal object to run. Well, we haven't written the function yet, but we're going to create one in just a minute, and we're going to call the function show goal. All right. So we've got the trigger box set up now. Now we need to set up this goal object so that it can run this show goal function and turn itself from being invisible to being visible. So let's do that now. I'm going to go back and select my Adventure Scripts folder, choose Create and JavaScript, and we're going to call the script show goal. Open it up in MonoDevelop. And this is going to be a very short script. I'm not going to make use of the start function. I'm not going to make use of the update function. I'm going to use my own custom function. All right, called show goal. Remember, that's the function that we said we wanted the goal object to run. So what's going to happen in this show goal function? We're going to make it so that the platform is visible. And to do that, we can use one quick line of code that just says renderer enabled equals true. All right. So how's that work? Let me save this. Each game object has a mesh renderer. You can see it's right here. In code, that's simply called the renderer, right? Oop, need one more ER, renderer. And then it can either be enabled, as it is now, or it can be disabled. Okay? So enabled can either be true or false. So currently it's false. So we've turned off that renderer. Okay? Now what we want to do, I'll go ahead and turn it back on so we can see it. Let's grab that script and we'll attach it to our goal object. Let me save my script. Come back in here. It's complaining because before I had misspelled a renderer, but now I've got it spelled correctly. So I'm going to grab this show goal script, attach it to goal, and then you'll see it over here, and it doesn't take any variables. So let's turn off our mesh renderer. And then I don't want to have to go make my way up all of these platforms because it would take me forever. And so to test it, I'm going to cheat, basically. You can see this is the topmost platform. I'm going to select it, and that's target A. I'm going to grab my first-person controller, go to Game Object, and say, let's see. Well, actually, I'm just going to drag it over there. Grab it, take it up, pull it over here, pull it up over here. Just position it so that it's sitting right on top of this last platform. There we go. And now when I hit play, you'll see that I'm riding my way up this last one, and as I get close, hey, there's that final platform right there. Okay? And that is all there is to it. I might want to move my goal a little bit. It seems like it might be a little too, it's close to this one, but to make my job a little easier, I'll move it right underneath here. And then a final step is we don't want to see the target A and target B platforms. So I'm going to open up each of those platform sets, select target A and target B, and I'm going to turn off the mesh renderer for those. Down to the next set, target A, mesh renderer is off, target B, mesh renderer is off. Come to the final set. Mesh renderer is off. Mesh renderer is off. Alright, I'll cheat by starting way up here high. See, it looks like I'm coming to nothing, but oh, there it is. And it suddenly appears right as I reach that final space. I'm at the top, which means I've completed the game, and I've completed the assignment. Alright, I know that's a lot of steps, but I'm absolutely certain that you can do it, especially after having watched this video. Once you have completed your game, you'll want to, if you've been cheating by moving your first-person controller to test it out, you'll want to move your first-person controller back down on the ground so that it's starting close to the bottommost platform. And you'll want to test the game a few times to make sure you can actually do what it is you're supposed to do. Now, there's a last requirement that is listed in the assignment, and I'm going to let you to choose whether or not you want to do that. The last requirement is to create a plane that's 10 by 10 to use instead of this terrain. If you have already finished your game and you've got it working well and you've got the terrain there, I'm going to go ahead and let you just use that terrain. You don't have to create the platform. But just to show you how it's done, given that that is an original requirement for the assignment, I'll quickly show you how to do it. So I'm just grabbing Game Object, choosing Create Other, and choosing Plane. Throws a plane down here. I'm going to move it down a little so that it's underneath my player and it's underneath this first platform. I'm going to scale it to be 10 by 10. All right. And I'm going to give it a material. I don't want to give it the same test bark material because we've got so many of the same material it'll be a little hard to see. So I'll just create a new one. So I'll go Create, Material, I'll call this Floor, and then I'll just select a different texture for that one. I'll use this Good Dirt texture. And I'll drag it out onto my floor. There it is. All right. Looks a little weird tiled as it is, so I'm going to up the tile. I'll make mine 10 by 10. Then I'll select my terrain, and my terrain's so nice I don't want to get rid of it, so I'll just turn it off. And you'll see now, I need to make sure that my first-person controller is not going to fall through the floor. Okay, raise him up, and we should be okay there. There. You have to make sure your first-person controller is not intersecting with a plane, and because if it is, it will fall through the floor. So I'll step onto this, and right it on up, step onto the next one, and then etc., 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 till you get to the top. So officially, this is the final version of the game for your assignment. If you want to use the terrain instead, as I said, that's fine. Once you have all that stuff working, make sure you save your project, and you've saved your scene. Then you need to publish this out as a working Unity program. So you're going to go to File, Build Settings. I want you to save it out for Windows x86. Check the player settings. The resolution and presentation, we don't want default to be full screen, so deselect that. That's very important. Okay. And then currently there are no scenes inside my build. This was a problem in a couple of the assignments I received where students forgot to put in the scene or they had the wrong scene. So you want the current scene. In my case, mine's called Moving 1. Then build and run. Give it a name. Call mine assignment for Nelson. It's helpful if you give the project a name that has your own name in it. It makes it easier when they are being graded not to get confused about whose project is whose. And then be sure that you test your game to make sure it really works before you submit it. If I'm unable to open the game for any reason, then you'll get a 0 on it. Also be sure that you're actually sending me the game file and not sending me this set of Unity files. I've had students do that as well. And also you need to make extra sure that you are sending both the player and the associated data folder, and I'll show you that in just a moment. Alright, so when you go to run this, you'll see you should get this window. It shouldn't automatically start full screen, and then you should be able to play it. And you'll want to make extra sure that it actually works before submitting it. Test out everything, test the game itself to make sure that you can get to the top level, make sure that the platform appears. And then when you publish out to Windows, again, there are two things you need to zip together when you submit. One is the Unity player, which will have the name that you gave your project when you published it, and the other is a data folder that must be with it in order for the game to run. Each week in class, at least one student has sent me just the player and not the data folder, and the game didn't run, and then they got a 0. So make sure you don't do that. That's it. Good luck and have fun with this assignment.